I love this concept of knowing your baseline because your baseline is how you feel in your body when you're not being pulled around by caffeine and alcohol and recovering from overeating sugar and maybe having foods to which you have an immune response to or can't digest well. The term baseline I get from my nature connection studies, where you go out in nature and when you're walking, all the birds run away from you. They squawk, they fly, they're like, oh my God, this giant person is coming. Woof. And all you see are little bird butts flying away from you. But if you sit down still for 20 minutes, all the critters just come back and you start to experience your natural ecology at their baseline, how they are when you're not around. And it's like this calm, natural space. And so that feeling of being at baseline is something in our inner ecology as well. And it's from the baseline, it's so much easier to notice the possible reactions. We've simplified our diets a bit so that if we were to have something, we notice our reaction much more. And we'll talk a little bit about the difference between allergies, sensitivities, and intolerances, and how to do this reintroduction so that you notice that reaction more clearly. A true allergy is when you go to an allergist, they are checking for when you have an immediate immune response because they want to make sure that you're aware of anything that might cause hives or anaphylactic shock or something more serious. An allergist does not see a food sensitivity as a true allergy, even though it is an immune response, but it's a delayed immune response. It's a different kind of immune cell response. So it takes a while to experience the response. The true allergies that cause immune responses that happened immediately are generally located on your mucous membrane. So you swallow something and your immune cells there, like the IgE, immunoglobulin E, will respond right away. Whereas a food sensitivity might be an IgG response. And for that, you kind of have to get it through your digestive tract. And that just can take a while. And it can really vary how long it can take. And you can just imagine how difficult it is to track something down when you have a delayed immune response, because, between when you took that substance in, you probably had maybe 30 other ingredients, that went in there too. And so I don't know. A food intolerance is not to do with your immune system. So in any of these, you could have bloating and gas. But a food intolerance is bloating and gas because there's the lack of an enzyme to break the food down properly. So it's nice to sense the difference. We are really going to be detectives. We're going to sharpen our body awareness. We're going to keep a log, introduce one new food every 48 hours. The first day we'll have a few servings. The second day we'll just be aware and tune in. And then we'll also write down our reactions. These are possible reactions that you are going to be looking for. Headaches, stuffy, runny nose, bloating, gas, stomach pain, irritability, depression, fatigue, insomnia, joint pain, puffiness, inflammation, skin rashes, dizziness, brain fog. Sometimes you don't know how it's going to affect you. Let's just think about hypothetical examples. So let's say you eliminated dairy and you want to introduce dairy. Well, there's a few different forms of dairy, right? So yogurt is one form, whereas milk is another form. And yogurt and milk are very different because yogurt is fermented. The bacteria have eaten much of the milk sugar in there. So if you have an intolerance to lactose, then yogurt might be possible for you to enjoy with no problem. But milk would be still full of lactose. And if you're lactose intolerant, that would be problematic. So you could test yourself by having a cup of yogurt on the first day. Let's say it's Friday, and you have it a couple of times during the day. Like, enjoy yogurt that first day. And then the second day, you don't have any more yogurt, but you're really tuning in and notice how you feel and you take notes. And certainly if you notice something on Friday, you can take notes too. It's really good to write it down, even though you might have a very busy day and you feel like, oh, I'll remember. You won't remember. I'll just say that. It's like if you're an herbalist and you make a tincture and you say, oh, I know what that is. I don't have to label it. I'm going to remember what herb is in that jar. Believe me, you come back to that jar and you're like, what did I tincture? I don't know. It's the same way with reintroductions. So write it down. The third day, Sunday, if you did have a reaction to yogurt, you would probably be back to baseline. If you are not back to baseline, you would add another day and make it a 72-hour time in between. But generally, most people are back to baseline after 48 hours. And if you've had no reactions, you're going to reincorporate yogurt into your diet. So then you can also add a cup of milk that day since you're starting a new 48-hour cycle and have a cup of milk at breakfast and lunch. The next day is the watch and wait day and writing it down, your symptoms. And then Tuesday, if you're still having reactions, let's say you didn't have reactions to yogurt, but milk, you're thinking, I think I did have reactions, then you just keep eliminating the milk and wait an extra day. Once you're back to baseline, you can reintroduce another food like gluten. So that's just an example. So you want to sketch out your plan. I would say, what is the food that you miss the most? What would make you happy to have back in your diet? So you want to test that one first. So let's say for this person, it's eggs. So Friday eggs, Saturday no eggs, Sunday gluten. Because maybe you want to try sourdough bread. Maybe you do okay with sourdough bread, but not with regular gluten bread. Sourdough is a fermented bread, and so it's possible that it would have broken down the gluten enough for your particular system. And then you could try gluten. In this case, they're trying gluten in two different ways, the form of sourdough, and then 48 hours later, the form of gluten as yeasted bread, like a regular bread. And then moving on to soy 48 hours later. And there's my little joke. Would you like decaf, regular, or extra fidgety? If you've eliminated caffeine, and you notice that you're a little calmer, but you still really want some, you can explore the smallest amount that will make you happy. Or you could just continue to eliminate it. So any of these things, the same thing with chips. If you feel like you've gotten off the chip train, extend it because there really is no way around it. Unfortunately, there's nothing healthy about the fried chips. I suppose you can fry things in lard or coconut oil, but that still doesn't eliminate all the problems with fried food in terms of the acrylamide from heating the potatoes to a high degree like that. So you enjoy a little bit, or if you feel like, see, there's a feeling inside when you're presented with a tempting food and you say to yourself, I really want that. And then you ask yourself, I want it, but I know I feel better without it. Can I say no? And can I live without it? And like, yeah, okay, I can. Yeah, it would be nice. But then there's some days where you're like, I really want that. Darn it, See, I'm not in favor of wrestling yourself. I'm not in favor of having drawn out battles with your different personalities inside. I'm in favor of finding some peaceful way to say, oh, I really want that brownie. And then saying, okay, well, I'm going to have one bite. I'm going to have two bites. I'm going to have the whole darn thing and I'll pay for it, but I am willing to pay for it. You bargain. But you bargain with your eyes wide open. You don't bargain like blindly, like pretending you don't notice when you really do. I was presented with a home-baked brownie. This weekend, I was at my sister's and we were celebrating her birthday, and her husband made home-baked brownies. And the smell was incredible. Like the smell of baked brownies was so wonderful. But as we sat down and they had them and they asked me, would you like one? And I just was like, I can live without it, so I'm going to stay living without it. And that felt fine to me. And they were fine with me. No pressure at all from my family. I think part of what I'm saying here about not getting into battles with yourself is you really want to cultivate having a way of speaking to yourself over these little struggles that we have around food and taking care of ourselves. And you want to have a really respectful, kind, loving regard for your body. We're all aging, so we're all encountering different things as we age. And it's important to be kind and sweet with ourselves. You want to exercise, but exercise is a pain in the ass. I mean, some people have done it often enough, so they're really familiar with the terrain of pushing themselves. And I've gotten myself better at that as well. But some of us, if we haven't exercised in a while and we push ourselves, you go, oh, this is not much fun. I'm hot and bothered and sweaty and tired. Just be kind with yourselves. So anyway, consider the words that you say to yourself around these things. So, intermittent fasting or fasting in general. So, this is very optional. No one has to feel any pressure at all to fast. It might not be your thing, it might not be the right time, but I wanted to bring it up here because if you are interested in fasting and you are curious, this is an ideal time to try it in the sense that chances are you're not so pulled by food cravings. And so it's an easier time to do without food. Fasting and intermittent fasting, it lowers overall exposure to insulin, which is a growth hormone. It's a wonderful hormone that helps bring glucose out of your bloodstream and into the cells. But obviously, we get too much exposure when we've had too many sweets and simple carbs in our lives. And then we're getting older, right? So, like, it's cumulative. We have to be even more aware of these things. Fasting increases human growth hormones, helps cells to regenerate. There's cells that aren't working very well in our body and they're just hanging around. But when we fast, we clear them out. It stimulates the mitochondria, which are the energy generators. It helps them to replicate and it rests digestion, which can be a really wonderful thing. Basically, what it is windows of time in a 24-hour cycle, anywhere from 12 to 20 hours without eating. So, obviously, if you quit eating at 6 p.m. and you don't eat again at 6 a.m., that's your 12-hour window. And a lot of people do a certain amount of intermittent fasting anyway. It's natural to have a certain amount of time. I think a lot of people are more closer to 10 hours and maybe even less. For some, 12 hours might be a stretch. A really common window for people who are doing some intermittent fasting is 8 p.m. to 12 noon, 16 hours. And another one is obviously more intense is to stop eating at 1 p.m. and not eat again until 9 a.m. So that's 20 hours. One of the ideas is that in a way, it replicates the diet of our ancestors. And we don't know exactly how our ancestors ate, but it's very clear that they didn't have constant ready access. This is very unusual for humans to have the constant ready access to food that we have. And then the other thing I want to say is that this is all very much easier to do with a lower carb diet. If you have a diet that's higher in carbs, even if they're whole carbs, you get a little bit more hungry, you get a little bit more that low blood sugar feeling when you go longer periods without eating. And I have found that as I have generally just reduced my carbs, not to say carbs are bad, they are wonderful. They have many good things. They come with all kinds of phytonutrients and vitamins and minerals. I'm not a down on carbs person. It's just that fasting is easier to do when you don't have a high carb diet. So that is intermittent fasting. A mini fast is an all day fast with water only or with bone broth, tea, and coffee or coffee. It could be a 36-hour fast or it could be a 24-hour fast. And I find the 24-hour fast is not too difficult. So you fast in the day and then at 7 p.m. you have a snack or a light meal and then, you continue the next day. You can also just go all day with just water and not eat until the next morning. So that would be a 36-hour fast roughly. So the bone broth diet was, I'm trying to remember the doctor that proposed it. I have her book. She has a really wonderful book called The Bone Broth Diet. This is makes it easier for people to fast is to have bone broth because as soon as you're hungry, you can have bone broth and it does stave off the hunger a little bit. But it's also simultaneously rich in nutrients that a lot of people need, especially older people. So it's rich in collagen, which is the part of all of our connective tissue that makes it strong. Gelatin, glycine, minerals, glucosamine, healthy fats. So it supports healthy skin, reduces wrinkles, yay! Supports human growth hormone, which increases fat burning, heals a leaky gut, so we absorb nutrients better, less inflammation, fewer food sensitivities, reduces pain, and improves sleep. And if you don't want to do bones because you're a vegetarian or you like the idea of doing a fast with a broth, then you do a vegetable broth, like lots of root vegetables, simmer, 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 so that the vegetables no longer have any taste in them. You strain it out. But here's some tips for making it a little bit more like bone broth. It's obviously not going to be a lot like bone broth, but in the last half hour, add a quarter cup of flax seeds, and that gives you more mucilage for healing the gut. Because a lot of people do bone broth for healing the gut. And this is another way to get a little bit more mucilage in there. It'll make the texture a little slippery. When you serve yourself, you can add a little bit of coconut oil or ghee. You can add turmeric and black pepper. Those together help turmeric to be absorbed better than turmeric without the black pepper. And it makes it more anti-inflammatory. And then you can add some nutritional yeast for B vitamins. Obviously, this is not fasting when you're having the bone broth. You get more benefits when you just have water. However, if it's just too miserable to just have water, then you get a lot of benefits from fasting with broth. And it's worth it. What if you do? If you get hungry, you drink broth, drink extra water. Sometimes you just need to distract yourself for a little bit. And it's also, if you're really miserable, just break the fast a little earlier than you planned, and that's totally fine. There's some days, I don't know, it goes easier than other days. I did a 4-day fast with water and it was pretty easy. I added electrolytes, high quality electrolytes, because you don't want crappy forms of zinc on an empty stomach. It's just very unpleasant. And I also added, which I had never done before, I added psyllium husks in water. So I had that together. It was the most fantastic drink. When you're fasting, it tastes great and it sort of sticks to your ribs a tiny bit. It also helps with keeping your intestines going because you still keep going even if you're not eating for 4 days because you got stuff in there. So you can combine the reintroductions with the intermittent fasting. So the days that you're not reintroducing could be potentially a wonderful day to practice intermittent fasting or a mini fast. I generally like to be at home for the mini fast. I'm getting better at just fasting. I don't get low blood sugar that easily anymore, and so I'm okay when I'm out and about. It can be very energizing, and you can get a lot of stuff done without having to stop to prepare food and wash dishes. So you can do intermittent fasting 2 to 5 times a week. You could do 1 or 2 mini fasts a week. If someone is trying to lose weight and they have a chunk of weight to lose, this can be a really nice way to lose weight. Again, like our ancestors did not have food every single day, which is why we're so good at holding on to weight. But it's good to have different amounts of food every day, I think. I don't think it's normal to have the exact same number of calories every day. I don't think that's normal. You can sketch out your plan in advance. It doesn't mean that you're locked into your plan. I highly recommend just sketching this out the way you want to do it. And I wanted to add that stressed is dessert spelled backwards. Stress blocks weight loss. Increased cortisol raises blood sugar and insulin, which leads to fat storage. Cortisol increases your appetite. Stress leads to increased consumption of bandits like sugar chips, caffeine, and alcohol, which reinforces the cycle of more addictive eating. So again, back to yin building that really helps us shift to a parasympathetic state, a more relaxed state with lower cortisol and stress.